Hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone today. I'm Chris Arsenault. I'm the Director of Health, Safety, and Wellbeing for the Education Sector and Specialized Services at Public Services Health and Safety Association, or PSHSA. Today, our goal is to introduce you to an innovative solution developed by PSHSA, the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment tool tailored specifically for the education sector. This tool represents a significant step forward in our collective efforts to ensure a safer working and learning environment for educators and students. To begin, I'll share some background on the project itself, why revitalization of the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment tool was needed, provide insight into the need for such a tool and the collaborative efforts that have led to its development itself. Following the background, we'll complete an overview, or I'll complete an overview of the tool and how it can be utilized to conduct comprehensive risk assessments in the education environment. And then finally, I'll share some next steps as it relates to the education sector and the tool itself as we move forward. Just want to make sure it goes forward. Here we go. But to begin, it's important to share why PSHSA decided to focus on the revitalizing the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment tool. And as you can see from the slide, we were seeing an overall upward trend in the number of workplace violence incidents reported in schools. And in 2022-2023, the Ministry of Labor, Immigration Training and Skills Development conducted a compliance initiative where they conducted 347 field visits. And of these 347 field visits, 121 orders were issued, and 36% of these orders issued required the employer to actually either assess or reassess the risk of workplace violence. So that's a significant amount of those orders being actually related to workplace violence and risk assessment related to that. This is a large gap in compliance highlights the challenges for the education sector employers to meet the legislative requirements. So there must be something there that's a bit of a stumbling block for them. With this information available, PSHSA submitted a funding request to the Ministry of Labor to support this important work and really look towards how we can actually revitalize the tool that we did have previously to a risk assessment process and look at how we would do that. Okay. So the Ministry of Labor did approve and provide funding to help us address workplace violence in schools. And with this funding, PSHSA completed a project where data collection and analysis activities included. So we went out for a literature review of relevant information as it related to workplace violence in the education sector, a jurisdictional scan of educational and labor partners across Canada to find out what was going on and what those best management practices are that they're implementing or integrating into their workplaces. And then we actually conducted an online survey of education employees across the province. We did conduct a virtual workshop as well with OHS professionals from the education sector, and then virtual focus groups as well with representation from all different areas in the education sector. So that included various groups such as teachers, educational assistants, administrators. We had principals as well as OHS staff, and so a number of representatives in those focus groups as well. The toolkit development engaged those education workers, again, education administrators, health and safety specialists, labor union representatives, ministry and worker compensation representatives from across several provinces, representing various types of schools and school boards. So specifically, we were engaging elementary, secondary, public, private, Catholic, specialized, and French language schools to allow us to have a broad perspective of information as we went forward. We adapted the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment tool that had been developed by the British Columbia's Public School Employers Association with their permission moving forward. PSHSA, I have to say this, has to gratefully acknowledge the contributions of the members of the Health and Safety Committee members of the Ontario Association of School Board Business Officials, so also referred to as OASBO, and the many educational professionals and health and safety professionals across the province who helped assist us with the preparation of this toolkit. It was a collaborative effort, and we can't say that enough, as how much input was actually sought as well as provided as we actually went forward with the development of the tool. So the purpose of the tool and toolkit is to assess those who work in the education sector with preventing injuries from happening or reducing the severity if they occur as a result of workplace violence. The tool also guides users in identifying and prioritizing their hazards in their workplaces and helps them develop and implement controls. Further, it also creates awareness among all workers about the potential for workplace violence and where that can enter into their workplace. Some of the key features of the tool, or sorry, some of the intended users for the tool is actually it's designed for the education sector specifically, including educators, as I said, non-teaching employees. So this could be your administrative staff, office staff, as well as janitorial staff, principals and their designates, members of the Joint Health and Safety Committees, health and safety representatives, as well as school boards and the authorities themselves. This tool was created to give consideration in emphasizing a participatory approach. So really we want folks to actually work together as they're actually conducting the risk assessment. It's not just a top-down directive. Instead, we're looking at collaboration with frontline staff, the people who know their environment and the specific challenges that they face every day. The collaboration will ensure that more comprehensive assessment is completed while fostering a culture of safety and mutual responsibility throughout the organization. Just as a reminder, the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment Tool is one resource that can help the education organization to identify early warning signs so that employers can take action to keep their workplace safe and comply with legislation. It's one tool that's in the toolbox and anybody can include as they move forward. Some of the key features, though, the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment Framework offers is a comprehensive approach specifically tailored to address the unique challenges within the education sector. So we've really looked at it and tried to include the language and the verbiage that the education sector uses. It encompasses many factors pertinent to the safety and well-being of educators and staff members. It was developed in collaboration with, as I said, with stakeholders from the education sector, ensuring that it reflects the diverse perspectives and incorporates the industry-specific expertise. The framework is freely accessible and is designed to be user-friendly with that in mind, and making it easy to navigate for all stakeholders so you can actually take it in and implement it in an organization quite easily and fluidly. Its intuitive design streamlines the risk assessment process and enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of it. It facilitates smooth adoption within the educational institutions by seamlessly integrating it into e-tools and existing databases. So this is a feature that we were looking for as we move forward, is to create a tool that can easily be adapted into other environments and databases that may already exist within the education sector as well. So it's grounded as well in evidence-based practices, and the framework incorporates the latest research and industry standards to ensure the highest effectiveness in identifying and mitigating workplace violence risks. This evidence-based approach enhances the reliability and the validity of the workplace violence risk assessment process. And in addition to the core framework, supplementary resources are provided to support implementation efforts further. So we've actually developed additional resources to support educators and administrators in the education sector. So there is a toolkit that's available that gives practical guidance on how to actually use the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment tool, as well as an information webinar that actually walks you through the process, and then an informative infographic that summarizes those key concepts as well for easy reference. And I'll refer to those later in the presentation as well. But before we get started, I'd like to walk through the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment tool and give an overview of it. But I think it's necessary just to give a bit of an idea, again, to understand what the workplace violence means as it relates and how it's defined under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So the workplace violence is defined as the exercise of physical force by a person against a worker in the workplace that causes or could cause physical injury to the worker. It's an attempt to exercise physical force against the worker in a workplace that could cause physical injury to the worker. or a statement or behavior that is reasonable for a worker to interpret as a threat to exercise physical force against a worker in a workplace that could cause physical injury to the worker. And it's important to think as we were actually developing the tool that we had to keep this in mind as we were moving forward to ensure that we were actually meeting those parameters as well as the definition. Along with this, is a reminder of the workplace violence definition, I want to share the steps of a risk assessment process as well. So the risk assessment process is a proactive process, again, empowering individuals to recognize the potential hazards, evaluate the likelihood and severity of injury or harm that could cause, and take steps to control or eliminate those risks. This approach is a tool to prevent potential hazards and protect the school community. And so here's how a risk assessment breaks down with the RACE approach. So looking at it again from the RACE approach. So recognizing hazards is looking for anything in the school or site that could cause physical injury or illness, such as unlit areas, working in isolation, or students with high needs. So just thinking about those different examples that actually could exist and actually having the educators understand what recognizing those hazards may be, how it's done. And then assessing the risk, this is where they'll consider how likely it is for someone to get hurt because of the hazard and how serious the physical injury or illness could be. Controlling the risk is where they would actually talk about taking action to reduce or eliminate the risk. This could involve things such as an example, installing panic buttons in high-risk areas, enhancing communication processes by implementing a clear emergency response plan, or training staff to respond to potential hazards as well. And then the E for the evaluate controls is the regularly check to do that second review to see if the controls and the measures that have been implemented are effective to prevent any injury or harm. So, and if not, then it's talking about how do you adjust and trying different approaches. The idea behind a risk assessment is that it's not a one-time activity and it's an ongoing process to provide you with the confidence and as well as continuously improve and adapt to changing circumstances, especially in the education environment as well. So this gives a visual representation of the tool itself, and it shows its layout and its functionality. And this is very broad-based in that, and I know you can't see everything, so we're going to talk about the different aspects of it in just a couple of minutes, but it's just a matter of taking a look at it. The tool is currently in an Excel spreadsheet format. It has 15 columns that's subdivided into the 14 race sections. However, as previously stated, the tool can seamlessly be integrated into e-tools and existing databases that schools or school boards may have. At the bottom of the screen, you can see 3 tabs of, sorry, I just want to make sure I can do that. 3 tabs at the bottom, and the first tab is the Workplace Violence Risk Assessment Tool. And then the second tab is the instructions in case you forget some of the information that we provide through the toolkit or through the webinar itself. The third tab is the risk matrix, where you can find the definitions for the categories of probability and severity as well. So those are things that we want to have as prompts within the tools to allow people to visually see what's necessary and be able to refer to it as required. We'll devote the next few slides to the reviewing each section within that tool. It's important to remember that tool currently showcases several considerations within it. So we've provided examples as well as put prompts into the tool. So it'll allow educators as well as administrators to actually really think about what exists from a hazard perspective from when they're recognizing it, and then actually talk about controls as well. And so we've actually put prompts into the tool as we move forward with that. So the first part of the actual tool itself is really the general information, where they would identify the school name, the date that the risk assessment is being completed, as well as the person or persons being completing the assessment itself. The other aspect of it is this is, you can see it says this is an initial assessment on the screen here. You can actually choose whether it's an initial assessment or it's a reassessment being done, because at times our circumstances change and we want to be able to adjust that risk assessment, but we want that historical piece as well. So we want to see that continuity of the risk assessment and keep it in that living document state. So just being able to identify that. In the next section, this is where we look at the recognize aspect of the race. So the risk assessors will choose the work condition or setting that will be assessed, or a number of them that may be assessed as well. Each work condition or setting is categorized under broader categories such as exterior settings, interior settings, community and off-site locations, access and security, student interactions and activities, employee interactions and activities, and other section for miscellaneous things. So we know that there may be things that haven't been considered here, so we want that flexibility within the tool for folks to be able to add things in. And then note in column B, the area of risk identifies the work condition or setting the risk belongs within. So this can be either a location, so this is a physical area where potential harm or potential hazards exist or incidents may occur, or circumstance. So you can look at it from that aspect as well. So thinking about situations or conditions that might lead to injury or harm. The risk assessors can refer to the examples provided in the consider column. So these are the prompts that we've put together, and these were developed with our focus groups to ensure that we were trying to be as comprehensive as possible. So it will allow folks to have those prompts and those ideas of what to think about as they move forward when they're actually identifying these and recognizing these hazards. The assessors should identify the individuals as well who may be affected by the hazards under those potentially affected column. So we would want to identify whether it's teachers, educators, whether it's custodian staff, etc., administrators you can identify as well. Okay, and then when we're looking at assessing the risk, we did talk through this, and we're looking at a risk matrix here, similar to the WVRA tool that was just shared, but where we're looking at considering the probability and severity. We talked with our focus groups specifically in our workshop and talked about the matrix itself, and they identified that the simplified risk matrix would be an advantage for the folks that are actually completing the risk assessment. So anything too complicated would hinder maybe the process, so they wanted to ensure that it was done by a 3x3 matrix. So looking at probability, this is the probability of each hazard. An assessor will ask how likely will the hazards cause physical injury or illness, and then respond with one of the three categories, high, medium, or low. We've put in definitions of high, medium, or low, so looking at that within the risk matrix, and that's on the third tab of the actual of the tool itself. However, this can be interchanged if an organization actually has their own definition of what probability is from a high, medium, low perspective, so they can actually add their definitions if they choose to. We also looked at severity as well. So, and the severity is to assess the severity of each hazard. The assessor should ask how serious could the physical injury or illness be. And when we look at this, we're looking at three different identifiers as well, or three different categories. So major, moderate, or minor. Again, looking at the severity of the potential injury or physical injury that could occur, or the illness as well. So we've actually included definitions for this. And again, if an employer has their own definition of major, moderate, or minor, they're able to adapt the tool themselves to actually reflect their own definitions. From our perspective, the major is defined as the hazard causing fatal or serious physical injury or illness leading to permanent or long-term disability or significant loss. These would require immediate medical attention from healthcare professionals to save lives or prevent permanent harm. Moderate is defined as the hazard causes physical injury or illness significant enough to result in the lost time from work. These require immediate medical attention from healthcare professional, and 5 or more days lost time due to treatment and recovery may be needed. And then minor is the hazard could cause slight physical injury without requiring time off or causing any other significant loss. So it's just a matter of thinking about how you would want to categorize that as an organization, but we've included those definitions in there so an organization can use those if they so choose. And then when we look at continuing with the assess process, we're looking at including or calculating the total risk rating by using the actual probability of occurrence, and where you would select the high, medium, or low. And then you would actually select the severity of outcome and select major, moderate, or minor. The total risk rating is automatically calculated based on the severity and probability ratings entered. So You'll use this score to help prioritize which work condition or setting requires immediate attention, especially if assessing multiple conditions. So if you're looking at completing this risk assessment tool as a whole, then you may actually come out with a number of high, medium, or low total risk ratings. And so you're wanting to take a look at that and deal with the high risk ratings first and foremost. When we look at identifying current and new controls, we're looking at providing in the first column there, you can see examples of controls. Again, these are examples that were provided by the focus group. So we talked through different controls that they would have in their workplace currently and used their terminology, their language, and made it specific to the education sector to allow us to actually populate that. So we really want to make sure that we've got people thinking about what kind of controls could they or should they be putting in place. And then there's a column for actually them to list the controls that are already in place. So there to take a look, list things that they have in place. Yes, they may include some examples of controls that are already there in the prompts. However, there may be other things that they may have actually identified themselves that they actually would include in that. And then potential new controls. So they want to identify new controls that could be implemented to mitigate the risk in the potential new controls column. These, like as I said, can be copied from the examples in the controls column, examples of controls column, as well as those that are shared by the risk assessment through the risk assessment process. So any of the individuals that are actually participating or even the Joint Health and Safety Committee may have some ideas and some recommendations there as well. This proactive step allows you to consider additional measures beyond the existing controls, thereby enhancing workplace safety. So the goal is actually to continue that process and to continue to enhance safety in that workplace. So the other piece that we want to recognize is that not all suggested controls may be applied to a specific workplace. So some workplaces may have different things available to them, as well as knowing that there can be different things as it relates to from maybe a financial perspective that it may not be available or different ways to think about it. But we're trying to make it as comprehensive as possible so they can actually choose and review different things that are available. And that's why we want to make sure this tool is flexible and empowers them to complete the risk assessment and as a conductor of the risk assessment to choose controls that best suit their unique workplace needs and circumstances. And then with the next section here, we're looking at specifying the actions required to eliminate or control the risk associated with the hazard and provide details on how that action plan will be implemented in the action items column. So giving some detail on that. What does that look like and how are you going to move forward as an organization? They're going to select a target date for those new controls and action items and then identify people the people or person that's responsible for implementing the new controls as well. Okay. And then from there, we've included the opportunity to evaluate the action plan. So we'll document the status of the action plan item. So in the action plan status update, there is a menuized item. You can select not started, in progress, or completed. So it allows you to keep track of that. It also sets the target date as well as there is a completed date item as well. So just trying to think about that and making sure that you're able to track that document and continuing to have that document live in the environment going forward. So that's the overall view of the actual tool itself. And so we want to just kind of share some next steps for the risk assessment within the education sector as well. So it's important to think that, we don't end here. So we want to make sure that we're moving forward and continue to look at how we can mitigate workplace violence in the education sector going forward. So right now, we're currently working with public and Catholic school boards to transition the tool into an existing school-based software platform that's available to them. This will allow the administrators and educators to use the workplace violence risk assessment tool in a web-based environment that they're familiar with. So they already have this software. It is something that we're able to adapt into that environment with the goal of increasing the completion of the required workplace violence risk assessments themselves. So it's really an opportunity for us to work with them and collaborate with them as this moves forward. For independent and private schools, we're collaborating with the various associations and independent schools across the province, and we're reviewing opportunities to bring a software solution to this group of schools as well. Just looking at that, it's just a little bit different process just based on the need and the availability of things, as well as the different number of, or the I guess if you say the number of associations that are out there from a private or independent school perspective, we want to make sure that we're actually bringing the best possible tool that they'll be able to utilize as well. So along with the risk assessment tool, as I said, and I want to make sure I highlight this, is that it is available both in English and French language. So it's been adapted for that. PSHSA has also created a comprehensive PDF toolkit that's both available in French and English as well. The toolkit is an excellent resource for anyone looking to get the step-by-step understanding of how to use the risk assessment tool effectively. It includes detailed instructions, snapshots, checklists, and guides you through each phase of the risk assessment, making it accessible for both new and experienced staff members. So the idea was to make it as digestible as possible for folks. In that toolkit as well, there are a number of appendices that actually support organizations. So there's different reference points as well. So you can refer to those at any point in time if you have other questions related to that. There's pieces as included on assessment and reassessment, as well as confidentiality as well. So in addition to the workplace violence risk assessment and toolkit mentioned, there are also 2 infographics here shown that are available again in French and English. The first infographic showcases the purpose and the key features of our risk assessment tool. It's designed to give you a clear understanding of why risk assessments are essential and how the tool can make the process streamlined and thorough within your organization. The second infographic focuses on the RACE approach again, remembering that RACE stands for Recognize, Assess, Control, and Evaluate. This visual guide is a handy reference for remembering the steps to ensure a comprehensive risk assessment. We're actually recommending to a lot of educational organizations to actually, if they want to print this off and provide it to their joint health and safety committees, or additionally they can post it on their boards, depending on what it is. It just allows for a nice little resource for folks, and it's kind of a one-pager if they want to. The other piece that we do now have available as well is a recorded webinar regarding the tool and how to use the tool for administrators and educators. So that's available on our website as well. So all these resources can be found on our PSHSA website moving forward and under the title of Workplace Violence in Education. So we're trying to keep those tools growing and keeping them as robust as possible, collecting feedback as we go and ensuring that we're keeping a collaborative effort moving forward. So that's where we're at. So I guess I'll throw it out there for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It looks like a very comprehensive tool. I didn't see on your slide, it wasn't a link to you're putting it on the software used by school boards. Is it publicly available right now?
So the tool is publicly available now, yes, on our website, in the Excel format. So anything that's being adapted into E format is actually their own specific software tools at this point.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And there is a question from Tanya, but first I wanted to ask, and maybe, I'm sorry, I did get distracted trying to answer some questions in the chat from last year. Like workplace violence, there's a strong interpersonal risk element to it. So, which isn't like, I guess, how does that captured in there when, and I don't like to label people, but if there's a history of violence from a perpetrator, a student, a child even, or whatever, how does that
get captured?
How does that get captured, and how does it get recognized and assessed and prevented in future? Because that's tricky, of course.
Yes, it is actually. And so the tool actually prompts, so there is a section, I'll call it student dysregulation is one of the highlighted areas. So it's that interaction piece that actually does get highlighted within there. So you're actually taking a look at that. You look at different prompts there as it relates to that, and then actually look at the controls that you would look at. It doesn't, and I'll say this, it does not actually look at an individual level because what they want to do is actually lead them to their student safety plan or their IEP or whatever it is that actually it does exist. So we want to ensure that that is the focus for the individual students moving forward. But this is looking at the workplace and the environment itself. Yeah.
Okay. Tanya's question was clarifying, I think, the definition of severity, because did you say minor was no lost time and moderate is more than 5 days? I guess, Tanya, is your question, the difference between 0 and 5 is considerable? But anyways, any comment on minor, moderate, and I guess severe?
Yeah, so we actually looked at that when we were actually putting it together. It was a recommendation going forward. The minor, of course, was really no injury was actually occurring. The moderate, we were trying to actually put in a date, and it was we actually used a number from the WSIB or WSIAT or WSIA as it relates to the 5-day reporting piece. So that was why we actually chose the 5-day. So it's just a matter of how it was actually evaluated at that point in time. As I said, though, if you have different definitions in your organization of the severity or your probability, you can adapt that tool to allow for those definitions. So it's a matter of taking it and just changing out those definitions, and then you'll be able to take a look at that.
So yeah, so Tanya's question is so if it was 1, 2, 3, or 4
okay.
days, what
Yeah,
is it?
so I think I would probably put it at moderate, and I don't know if it says up to 5 days, or I maybe should just take a look at. I'll just take a peek at that because it should say up to 5 days. Because you're right, there is that gap in there if it doesn't say up to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I don't see any other questions, and we are already pushed for time. So I think your contact information is probably in your deck. So if people have any other questions, I guess, so we'll segue over to you, Daryl, to talk about Job Assess.